Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Right now, death threats at this Sarasota County Hospital over how it treated COVID patients. An internal review last month found Sarasota Memorial Hospital performed well, better than many of its competitors during the pandemic. But critics say the review is biased and maintain the hospital was blinded by CDC protocols.
10 Tampa Bay's Hannah Deneen was at Sarasota Memorial Hospital, where the board heard hours of passionate public comment.
There were two central focuses during public comment here at Sarasota Memorial Hospital today. First, what drugs were and were not used to treat COVID patients. Second, the desire to have a third-party investigation into how the hospital handled the pandemic.
SMH blew it on COVID.
A normally sleepy hospital board meeting, tonight brimming with emotion.
Of course you're a highly ranked hospital, but that doesn't mean you're God and incapable of error.
Bringing in speakers from across the state and country.
And the American people are watching you.
Critics railing against Sarasota Memorial's COVID policy, mainly how it avoided alternative medications like ivermectin or hydrochloroquine, which are not CDC recommended for COVID.
Right now, all of the evidence indicates that these other drugs, like ivermectin, are not useful.
Critics now calling for a third-party investigation paid for by the hospital into how it handled the pandemic.
I think it's in their best interest because they're publicly funded. This is what the public's asking for. We need to have transparency in our medical facilities, and we need to have faith in our medical facilities.
But board chair Tram Hudson says it's unlikely to happen. The board is satisfied with its internal review.
I don't believe there's any interest on the board to conduct another investigation. We believe that our medical staff has done a very thorough, comprehensive job.
In recent weeks, hospital workers and board members have faced a range of backlash, from online bullying to death threats. The Sarasota Police Department says it is monitoring those threats. In Sarasota, Hannah Deneen, 10 Tampa Bay.
The medical profession's pandemic downfall. Welcome back to Whistleblower Wednesday here on the Rob Maness Show live on Patriot.tv and our X Spaces simulcast. Well, Sarasota Memorial Hospital that you just saw there in that article has been recognized again among the world's best hospitals in Newsweek's 6th annual global ranking of hospitals just a few weeks ago. It is the only hospital in Southwest Florida ever to make the list, SMH announced on February 28th, 2024. But as we see in that opening video, the rating is highly suspect based on the hospital's past history. Well, Dr. Stephen Gafanti was an emergency room doctor for 50 years, but when he came down with COVID, he found himself as a mistreated patient in Sarasota Memorial Hospital in Florida. Dr. Gafanti also watched his roommate being mistreated by the hospital, whom he tried to help, but that led to his own mistreatment by medical personnel at that same hospital that you just saw. Well, Dr. Gafanti eventually checked himself out of the hospital in order to save his own life. The good doctor survived, but his roommate wasn't so lucky. Had they just listened to this experienced and caring doctor, the roommate would not have died. Well, Dr. Gafanti is my guest today on Whistleblower Wednesday. Welcome to the Rob Maness Show, sir.
Hi, Rob. Let me tell you what I found out since I got out of the hospital.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell your story. I want the folks to hear it.
Oh, God. All right. So I've been basically my specialty is emergency room. I've been a doctor for 50 years, and I was in Sarasota Memorial Hospital with COVID in August of 21. And as I got better, my roommate, who's 20 years younger than me and a marathon runner, was getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hung on my IV pole. I had him use his inspirometer. He was working on a fifth of a lung. He took me on as his patient advocate. We looked at his chart, and his chart said that he had a pneumonia and that the pneumonia was getting worse. And so I don't know how his doctor missed it, or at least I thought the doctor might have missed it. But what was happening behind the scenes was totally different. For instance, they removed our doctor's name from the whiteboard so that we wouldn't be able to contact him. And they wouldn't tell us his name. Now, one of the primary purposes of a nurse is to communicate to the doctor when things aren't going as planned, which means either the nurse wasn't following their primary purpose or the plan was for my roommate to die. And either one of those cases made me want to leave the hospital against medical advice. So the nurses concocted the story. Yes, go ahead.
Dr. Gapanti, you actually had your roommate ask him if he wanted you to be his patient advocate officially,
Yep.
and he said yes.
Yes.
What happened when you attempted to fill that role, which is, I assume, routine for a doctor of your stature and standing and knowledge and experience level?
Yeah.
You know, I think that it would not be a big deal. But
No,
what happened
it's
when
not. The problem is that the nurses, if you, I can only see my chart, but in my chart, the nurses never contact the doctor until after they had me tied to my hospital bed. Right? Never contacted the doctor, which, right, the whole reason for any kind of disagreement between me and the nurses was I wanted the doctor contacted. And then after they tied me up and put me in isolation, removed my oxygen, they then had to make up a story. And unfortunately, to cover up for themselves, they dragged a Dr. De Lucia into, to basically Baker Act me, which means it's legal to tie him up.
What does the Baker Act do?
It allows you to hold a patient for 72 hours against his will.
Wow.
So if they had held me for 72 hours, I'd have been dead. Right? No oxygen, no water, no food. And Dr. De Lucia made that decision 22 minutes before he saw me. So I don't know if you can imagine this, but because you do not need to be in the hospital to be Baker Acted. So imagine somebody goes on a computer somewhere in the world and issues a Baker Act against you. And the police come to your door and carry you away and tie you down. Now, that is as you heard Tram Hudson say, they've reviewed my case. Well, they've actually reviewed my case 3 times. And in 3 times, they have not figured out that the doctor should see the patient first, then decide what the treatment plan is. So you want to know why we want an independent review? Is because these doctors are dedicated to covering up what looks like medical murder.
Yeah, so you somehow got yourself out of the hospital in order to save your own life. How did you do that?
Well, I think that was God, but what happened was Dr. Johnson at 7 o'clock in the morning called my wife up and said, your husband was Baker Acted. He doesn't need to be Baker Acted. I'm letting him go. Now, Dr. Johnson did not see me until 9 o'clock. So whatever is going on at the hospital is all behind the scenes, right? Normally, you do not make a plan without a history, a physical, an assessment. But somehow Dr. Johnson made his assessment 2 hours before he saw me.
So, and that leads me to my question about, you two men are in this situation, your roommate and yourself. What is and I've heard you and other medical professionals and patients mention this phrase before, were you under the Fauci protocol treatment is why they wouldn't give antibiotics?
Yes, I was under the Fauci protocol treatment. I don't know whether it's why I couldn't get, why they wouldn't give my roommate antibiotics. I can tell you that my doctor was very upfront that while he was writing the orders, he was not in charge of my case. And that became obvious on day one. So on day one, I come in, he says, "When did you first get COVID?" I said, "Well, 11 days ago." He says, "Well, you're past the viral phase now." So I said, "Well, then why am I in COVID isolation?" And all he could do was shrug his shoulders. And I said, why am I getting an antiviral? All he could do is shrug his shoulders. So after a couple of times of that, I knew that while he was writing the orders, he was not in control of my case.
What is the Fauci protocol, Steve?
Well, it's actually the CDC NIH protocol, and it starts with hospitalization plus COVID, and then you do 200 milligrams of remdesivir, you do 6 milligrams of dexamethasone, and you add oxygen as needed. It sounds like a cake recipe.
No ventilators at this point.
No. But of course, if you let the person get a bacterial pneumonia that you will not treat, the lungs fill up with pus, and then they need a ventilator.
Yeah.
And
well, we've got a live audience, Steve, and I want to let somebody ask a question over there before we go to our first commercial break. But when we come back from that, I'm going to show a little clip from about what the WHO said about remdesivir. Kat is our host over in the simulcast spaces. We've got a hand up over there, Kat. Let's go ahead and get our first question.
Go ahead, Wib.
Hi, Dr. Garafanti and Colonel. I have a friend who works in hospital billing for a rather large Philadelphia area network of hospitals. And he was telling me during COVID that they were following explicitly that CDC COVID protocol, because if they didn't, they weren't allowed to mark any deaths with the COVID code and get money for it. Do you think what he was talking about has any bearing in how Sarasota was handling this?
Yes, I think so. A couple of things. One, just so that you know, my roommate wasn't alone. The NIH did a study that showed that the majority of the ventilator deaths were caused by untreated bacterial pneumonia. And number two, if you look in the last couple of years, 131 hospitals have closed. So what's going on is the Fed is decreasing the reimbursement and at the same time increasing the cost. And with COVID, they gave them a 20% bonus. So really, what is the Fed saying? If you kill these COVID patients, we'll let you survive to treat the others. I mean, that's the way it looks.
Wow. Yeah, it certainly looks that way. And we'll talk more about that after this break, Dr. Gavanti. Thank you so much. And we'll see what the WHO has said about remdesivir and COVID treatment when we come right back on the Rob Maness Show Live. It's Whistleblower Wednesday on Patriot.tv. We'll be right back.
The markets are getting crazy, and now is the time to protect yourself from economic turmoil. Silver is in the headlines right now and creating lots of excitement as the price of silver is extremely attractive compared to gold. A call to Swiss America gets you the scoop on whether the silver opportunity is for real. What you'll discover will really blow your mind. Today, silver faces a huge shortage due to the rising demand by military, solar, electric cars, and computers, all of which depend on silver. But right now, silver is priced to sell according to worldwide experts. Now, to help you get started, Swiss America is offering beautiful United States Walking Liberty half dollars, issued by the U.S. Mint from 1916 to 1947 and minted in 90% pure silver for a special introductory price. Limit of $250 per customer while supplies last. So call the number on your screen or visit SwissAmerica.com, because now is the time to rediscover silver.
Joining me at the news desk now is Rebecca Walzer of WalzerWealth.com. She has been a regular guest on my TV show, Brennan House Live, for a long time. She's not just an economics expert, but she's an attorney. Rebecca, you have a large firm. How many people work for your firm?
Just about 30, yes.
30. And
yes.
Tell me, how can people prepare for what's coming with the end of the dollar as we know it?
The end of the fiat system as we know it globally. We are moving to hard asset-backed currencies again. Thank the Lord, because fiat is where we get into all the problems. When you have debt-based currency, you have debt-based problems. And the United States, unfortunately, since 2020 has not stopped spending at pandemic levels. This is systemic and it is unsustainable, and it is coming to an end, especially with the addition of Saudi Arabia and the UAE to the BRICS nations. This is what controls our petrodollar. This is the threat immediately in 2024.
For more information, WalzerWealth.com. WalzerWealth.com. She is not your traditional financial planner. Find out why at WalzerWealth.com.
The World Health Organization, or WHO, has warned against the use of the antiviral drug remdesivir, as there is no existing evidence it improves survival among hospitalized COVID-19 patients. The drug, which is approved in the UK and Europe and for emergency use in the US, was used to treat US President Donald Trump in hospital. International experts, part of the WHO guideline development group, said the drug isn't recommended for patients admitted to hospital for COVID-19, regardless of the severity of their illness. The WHO recommendation, published in the British Medical Journal, was based on an evidence review that included data from 4 international randomized trials among more than 7,000 hospitalized patients. After reviewing the evidence, the panel concluded that remdesivir has no meaningful effect on death rates or other important outcomes for patients. The antiviral is one of only 2 medicines currently authorized to treat COVID-19 patients across the world. It has been approval for use in the United States, the European Union, and other countries after initial research found it may shorten recovery time in some COVID-19 patients. Made by the U.S. company Gilead, the drug is administered through intravenous infusion for 5 to 10 days at a cost of $2,550 or more than 100,000 pesos per treatment course. Kat Maraos, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show on Patriot.tv, and we're live on Whistleblower Wednesday with Dr. Stephen Gavanti, who actually was a COVID patient in the Sarasota Memorial Hospital, which is continuing to gather awards and accolades as one of the best hospitals in America and the world, really. But Mr. Gavanti's story really shines a light of truth on what was happening when he and his roommate were really not being treated I think, in the way that they needed to be treated from a medical perspective and from a humanitarian perspective. Dr. Confanti, welcome back. In that little clip there about remdesivir, I wanted to get this is my first interview with an actual medical doctor that was also a patient in this time frame. So I wanted to ask you about remdesivir. What is its purpose supposed to be? And because there's a lot of information out there, and it's usually in a negative context, from what I hear from folks that have either witnessed the treatment with it or been through it themselves. And as you saw, the WHO eventually said you shouldn't use it. So, what was its purpose supposed to be, and why was it not working? I guess is my question.
All right. Well, its original purpose is to stop viruses from replicating. So if you used it for that purpose, you would use it within the first 5 days of having symptoms. Normally, that would mean that the patient came to your emergency room and you would use it there. But the protocol required that you be hospitalized. So by the time you're hospitalized, you're past your viral phase and you're into the autoimmune phase that's filling your lungs up with fluid, and you're short of breath, and that's why you stay in the hospital. So by that time, the remdesivir is useless, right? It can't stop viruses that have already stopped replicating.
Yeah,
it can't go backward in time.
So the WHO mentioned potential harmful effects. If you're in that phase, is there something that it does to your body when you're in that phase that is going to be harmful?
When you use the remdesivir, you normally have a loss of kidney. Well, you can have a loss of kidney function. In fact, a lot of times you lose your kidney function, you end up on dialysis. If you look at the studies, remdesivir was stopped because of too many patients dying. It's appropriate to use during the autoimmune phase of COVID, but when they use it, they found that people died. It's, I talked about premeditated murder. Well, if the hospital really believed in remdesivir, then they would have made it available in their emergency room so that they could stop the virus before it started. I've treated lots of influenza, and you don't use remdesivir for influenza. You use a pill, an antiviral pill. But, we always had it available so that you could either give it to the patient or prescribe it to the patient. Remdesivir is IV. You'd have to give it to the patient.
So we were talking about the money issue before the break when the audience member asked the question about the hospital getting more money if somebody died with COVID and those kind of things. Remdesivir was very expensive, as we heard in that short clip there. Do you think that has or was an impact on the decision making to use it so much, even though people were dying more?
I think there's a couple of things. First of all, remdesivir is in the hospital is in the CDC protocol. So if the CDC says use remdesivir and use it for the first 5 days that the patient's in the hospital, and we will pay you 20% more for using remdesivir, then you've got a situation where you're going to take the money, or you're going to let the doctor be a doctor. Right? That's your question.
Yeah.
Are you going to let the doctor be a patient?
Right. That brings up another question that I had about this exact process in the hospitals. who is, because you mentioned the doctor wasn't really your doctor, who is making the decision to use remdesivir for 5 days of hospitalization, no matter what? Because that sounds like what was happening. Didn't matter what phase people were in, you were going to get this drug, no matter what. Who is that decision maker if it's not the doctor?
I don't know. It's why I want an independent evaluation. Right now, the doctor that Baker acted me is under state investigation. Right. If modern medicine allows a doctor to make a diagnosis without seeing the patient and then just move on, then I'm wrong. Because I was trained, you saw the patient first and actually talked to him.
Right.
But medicine, medicine is really, really screwed up and in trouble. If we can get an investigation, and that investigation says, I mean, what I'm hoping is they'll finally say, look, we didn't want to do this, but the feds made us. It was either do this or not get paid for anything. And
I just wanted the truth to come out, because I've had executive oversight over 2 military hospitals or large clinics, and and for the decision-making process to be taken out of the hands of the physicians in something this big is really concerning. Well, we've got a hand up over in our live audience with a question, Dr. Gafanti. Let's go ahead and go over there, Kat. I think it's Thomas Murphy that's got the hand up.
I love live people.
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Kat and Colonel. I appreciate the chance to ask. Doctor, my name is Thomas Murphy. I work with the coalition of candidates, elected officials, and doctors that are calling an end to these COVID vaccines, specifically that are on the CDC's list of mandated shots. I'd like to know what your stance is. I know that Dr. Rand Paul, Senator Paul, for the most part, he's still on board with pushing the COVID vaccines for the elderly because of their susceptibility for COVID-19. Can I ask you, sir, do you know who Dr. Mary Bowden is, and what is your stance specifically on the COVID vaccines? Thank you, sir.
No, I don't know Mary Bowden. If you want, here's what I tell my friends. If you are a liberal Democrat, absolutely get as many of those COVID vaccines as you possibly can. But for the rest of us, stay away from it. The thing is a bioweapon. Are you familiar with the Pfizer documents that were released talking about the COVID vaccine?
Absolutely, 100% I am.
So it increases your chance of getting COVID. Its side effects are numerous. The Department of Defense data says that the all disease category increased by 10 times. That's 1,000%. If you listen to the life insurance companies, they're having this huge increase in death rate. So no, I wouldn't give it to anybody but some super liberal Democrat that wants to be a test bunny.
That's a great answer. Doc, go ahead.
What?
Go ahead.
I also don't do street drugs. So when Pfizer says it'll take you 75 years to know what's in the drug, that's a street drug.
Now, see, this is a medical professional that believes in individual choices when it comes to their own medical treatment, and he's advocating for that, for these Democrats to be able to do it. Dr. Gafanti, we'll be right back here after this message, and I want to get your views on ivermectin because I think there's interplay between why ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine were pushed out of potential treatments, while these expensive drugs like remdesivir that really weren't working were advocated for by Fauci and the CDC and those kind of folks. So we'll be right back with Dr. Steve Gafanti on Whistleblower Wednesday. And really, the medical profession has destroyed its own credibility, and I don't know if it'll ever get it back. See you in a minute.
Hi neighbor, Pat Boone here. Today, I want to help you find some peace of mind concerning your money. Like it or not, we're all living in a financial war zone. That's right, we're watching our hard-earned dollars get crushed by inflation. In fact, recently inflation reached its highest level in 40 years. And on top of that, cash, which has always represented freedom and privacy, is more and more being replaced by a cashless system. That's right, powerful forces are definitely waging a war against cash. So I'm encouraging you to prepare before it's too late. Call or text the number on the screen for a free report, The Secret War on Cash from Swiss America. Discover how a few simple steps can protect your money as well as your privacy and your peace of mind. So call or text for your free report, The Secret War on Cash, and make sure to mention Pat Boone sent you.
Sounds rolling, all 3 cameras, we're good. Andy, speed.
Is there any regrets that you have in life? I should sit here and say, yeah, I got a lot of regrets. But when I look back on my life and I understand the lives that were lost, I mean, I'm sitting here with you. And I can tell my story.
Former National Security Advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, pleaded guilty today to lying to the FBI.
He was one of the most respected generals in the military.
He was, by definition, the most dangerous possible person for Donald Trump to hire.
Brilliant military career, serving 33 years. Why was he being so elusive?
Mike Flynn told the truth and faced life in prison.
Study shows the controversial treatment ivermectin may play a role in fighting COVID-19. Medical reporter Liz Bonus explains how.
Hey there, everybody. Hello to you. This research only part of laboratory trials so far, but Reuters reporting a Japanese company working with Tokyo's Kitasato University did find an antiviral effect against Omicron and other coronavirus variants.
We're still looking at ivermectin in a number of different ways.
Ivermectin is a medication that treats some parasitic diseases. There are 2 kinds of it, one for animals and one for humans. The National Institutes of Health has an ongoing trial to see if it could help in the treatment of COVID-19 very early in the course of the disease.
It doesn't seem to help people who are already hospitalized, doesn't seem to help people who are in the intensive care unit, but maybe we just haven't given it early enough. Maybe you have to get it very early in the course of the disease.
Reuters reports that in this lab study, the Japanese trading and pharmaceutical company pursuing the research did find ivermectin had an antiviral effect against Omicron, as well as other coronavirus variants, something those caring for patients say we have known.
Ivermectin does have some antiviral effect. It's just we're not sure how to use it, and we're not sure if in the long run it will make a difference.
No word on when the next level of trials in humans with this Japanese company might begin. I'm medical reporter Liz Bonus. Now back to you.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, live on Patriot.tv and X Spaces. And we're talking with Dr. Stephen Gafanti today about his experience at Sarasota Memorial Hospital in Florida, in his treatment and his roommate's treatment, or really non-treatment for COVID-19 a few years ago, and the story about that. And we've interwoven the subjects of remdesivir and now this ivermectin subject, Dr. Gafanti, I think is just as important because, you know, as you heard there in the audience, the antiviral effect is the same effect that remdesivir was chasing. And quite honestly, I'll just be upfront about it. I was vaccinated, got COVID. I took HCQ and ivermectin immediately for a short course of that. And when I went to my doctor, they gave me antibiotics. And within 4 days, I was completely well. I was a little washed out and feeling weak for a few days after that, but all the cough, anything else was completely gone within 4 days. And so I just wanted to take advantage of you being a medical doctor that's had the disease, been through the Fauci protocol, talked to many, many thousands, I'm sure, of patients that have had the disease. What is your take on drugs like ivermectin and HCQ? First, for their effectiveness against this disease, and then second, the interplay financially with the big fancy drugs like remdesivir and the CDC's position on all of them. Dr. Gafanti?
So I've treated a number of COVID patients once I got out, mostly my friends, because I don't want my friends to go to the hospital and die.
Yeah.
Always used ivermectin. I've also used high-dose vitamin C. Basically what the frontline doctors have been using for the same length of time. And never lost a patient. So we just use what works. It's normally we don't need the CDC to tell us what to use. We just use what works. And the docs are allowed to talk to one another until Google decided to shut us down. But, you know, there's always a phone call. So as far as ivermectin being used, I found it very effective. The research I saw said if you got it early, you only had a 5% chance of dying. But unfortunately, if you want an emergency youth authorization, you cannot have a drug like ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, which works. You need to have no choices to get an emergency youth authorization, which is what the COVID vaccine has gotten and what the remdesivir was being used as. So
Right.
there's
Now
an
that makes sense. Yeah, there is an interplay there. What about the dollars? It seems from a common sense perspective that there seemed to be a big push on the part of big government to go with the more expensive drug like remdesivir, and for that reason, not want to have ivermectin or HCQ as an acceptable alternative, in addition to being able to use or them not being available so they could use the EUA authorization. Do you think there's any truth to that?
Rob, it was the weirdest thing. So ivermectin is, I don't know, maybe 10 cents a pill. And then all of a sudden it was $10 a pill. And we were getting it from India. You know, I mean, it was hard. And you could not go to a normal pharmacy. You couldn't go to CVS or Walgreens or any of those big chain pharmacies and get your prescription filled. You had to go to a mom and pop pharmacy. And beyond that, we were going to, horse and feed places and getting their ivermectin, because really, if you take a look at the bottle, you can make sure that ivermectin is ivermectin. And then all of a sudden, pressure was being put on them to not let, you had to have a vet's signature. It was crazy.
Yeah, what did you think as a medical professional for so many decades when you saw the disparagement of this particular drug? I don't know if you've noticed in the clips that I played, but they always show the little box with the horse head on it for the ivermectin on the shelf at least once during one of those, during these types of media reports. But the disparagement of people connected to the horse dewormer phrase by the media, by government officials, by medical people, by their own family members. I mean, I've heard it across the board in society that these folks were getting attacked for doing what they thought was going to work, and the doctors too. When I got my kit, that's what I did. Was I got a prep kit, so I'd have it available. I had to go through a friend of mine who connected me with the doctor, who had to go through a certain set of procedures to make sure he was doing it legally according to his license, and I had to go to the right pharmacies in order to get it legally and not put him in jeopardy. I mean, that's just nuts that our society started doing that to professionals and just regular old American citizens that wanted to save their own lives or their family members' lives.
Yes. The America that you and I were raised in is gone. Doctors don't give mandates; they give advice, and so this mandate nonsense. I told one pharmacist, a CVS, I said, "This is what I ordered. You're not going to fulfill my order?" And the pharmacist had the nerve to say, "Well, that's not the appropriate order for this patient." And I said, "Well, you're the doctor. I just have the license." And then told my patient, let's go to a pharmacy that'll work with us. So the chains can't be trusted.
Yeah, it's really strange, and you have to laugh because it's so uncomfortable. Well, we've got a question over in the live audience, Doc. Gen X, go ahead with your question. I think you were next.
Yeah, so just a note, it's kind of crazy. I watch YouTube quite a bit, and in the midst of getting adverts, there was an advertisement for a hospital that was, we're groundbreaking at Parkinson's disease and treating cancer, and look what we could do. And in the middle of that commercial was a blip of, we can treat blood clots in 24 hours. Never in my life have I seen that as a groundbreaking treatment. It was kind of odd. So if you can note to that. Also, a second part is the anosmia that a lot of people experienced. I had COVID prime before it was even supposed to be here. I figured out I had COVID once the news started saying these are the symptoms for having COVID, and I had almost exactly every single one. And for me, I never lost my sense of taste and smell. I also never got COVID again. The next time I think I might have had COVID, it was more intestinal. It was just because I had been exposed to somebody who had COVID. I did caregiving for quite a few people who had COVID. I'm just wondering if, the missing of that going through the blood-brain barrier of losing the taste of sense and smell is a different effect on people in long term, how that works, if you know anything about that.
So your question sounds very confusing, but my guess is if you're calling yourself Gen X, you're younger, your immune system is more robust, and the effects of having COVID are much lower. When I got out of the hospital, I actually got IV vitamins and nutrients to get my brain back, because I was pretty dumb. So just to give you an idea, I actually had a doctor on the phone tell me why I needed oxygen. So I was pretty dumb. I was smart enough, of course, to know that you need to treat pneumonia with antibiotics. And so that is called long haul COVID, the dumbness. And at the time, they told me it would take 1 to 2 years to get over it, but I don't have 1 to 2 years to waste. So I used the IV vitamins to replenish my system and let my system clear the gunk out. So if that's something you're experiencing, that what we call brain fog post-COVID, the IV vitamins work really well. Was that your question? Or?
No, actually, I was basically, I passed out twice. I never went to the hospital. I was without insurance at the time, so I tried to, take care of what I thought was the flu, but definitely felt like no other flu I ever had before. I tend to get sinus infections, so I would have, some kind of color in my mucus. It was completely clear, and it never even went into my chest. But I also never lost my sense of taste and smell. All I had was the extreme tiredness for almost about a month, and the brain fog for about a month. But after that, I've had no lasting effects. And most of the people that I talk to who have had lasting effects, they've all lost their taste. They lost their smell and their taste while they had COVID. And I didn't know if there were any studies coming out on that, or if you had any information on that. Because I've never suffered with anything since then. It was about a month, and then it was done.
Yeah, so that's because you have natural immunity, which is not politically correct. You should correct yourself. But no, you don't have to lose your sense of taste. That sometimes happens and sometimes doesn't.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Doc. We got to take another break here, folks. But when we come back, we're going to dive deeper into the vaccine adverse reactions and reporting on that with Dr. Gavanti and get his take on what's currently happening with these vaccine boosters, which I may have taken the original shot, but I'm not taking any more, and neither will anybody in my family, because it seems like it's just an infection shot in order to make you get sick more often. We'll be right back on Patriot.tv with Rob Maness Live.
We've learned through the pandemic we can never be caught unprepared again. And so many Americans, when COVID hit, they had nothing in the house. The stores were shut down, and doctors' offices were shut down. And even if doctors prescribed drugs, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, pharmacists wouldn't fill the prescriptions. That was a nightmare.
Now the situation is much worse. We have these horrible supply chain problems. In our emergency medical kit at the Wellness Company, we have 8 prescription drugs that are all potentially life-saving.
Most people who died with COVID, they died in the hospital because they didn't receive early treatment.
Every American family should have one of these.
I can tell you the Wellness Company kit is the answer.
Superfoodshouse.com. Transform your life today. We have partnered with a superfood manufacturer and offer you a one-stop destination for organic, non-GMO superfoods. At superfoodshouse.com, we offer a premium selection of nutrient-rich superfoods, from the revitalizing protein shakes to the Super Amino 23 protein tablets. These tablets help your body rapidly absorb protein, creating lean muscle and burning fat. Visit superfoodshouse.com right now and seize limited time offers on superfood products. With just a few clicks, you can have these nutritional powerhouses delivered right to your door. Superfoodshouse.com, where wellness meets convenience. Your path to a healthier lifestyle begins here.
A woman from New South Wales has died after taking the AstraZeneca vaccine. An 18-year-old health worker has developed blood clots after getting her COVID vaccine.
An elderly woman has died in what's believed to be South Australia's first case of fatal blood clotting caused by the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine.
A Queensland man is in intensive care tonight suffering a blood clot after receiving his AstraZeneca vaccine. He's one of 5 similar cases around the country.
6 new cases of blood clots have been officially linked to the AstraZeneca vaccine.
3 more cases of blood clots have been linked to the AstraZeneca vaccine, including 1 case in an 80-year-old man.
53-year-old South Australian man is tonight gravely ill in intensive care after suffering a blood clot linked to the AstraZeneca vaccine.
In breaking news, a Central Coast woman has died after receiving a COVID vaccine.
The head of the Therapeutic Goods Administration is calling for calm following the deaths of 2 people in our state who received the COVID vaccine.
Concerns around the safety of the AstraZeneca vaccine have been realised here in Australia, with medical experts confirming the death of a Central Coast woman is likely linked to the jab. A major medical investigation is underway tonight over whether a local man suffered blood clots as a result of getting the Pfizer vaccine.
Australians are being urged not to jump to conclusions over the death of a woman from blood clots after receiving the COVID vaccine. Tonight, 7 News can reveal another similar death is also being investigated.
Authorities in Norway are investigating the deaths of at least 33 elderly Norwegians who received Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine.
The nation's medical regulator has revealed 7 new cases of blood clots linked to the AstraZeneca vaccine.
A Launceston family is pleading for help after their teenage daughter fell ill after receiving the Pfizer vaccine. Faith Ransett has been in and out of hospital and suffers almost daily tics after experiencing what a leading doctor admits was an adverse reaction to the vaccine.
It's estimated 79,000 people have suffered adverse reactions to vaccines.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show on Patriot.tv live and our X Spaces simulcast. And we're talking with Dr. Stephen Gafanti today about the medical treatments, his own medical treatment in the Sarasota Memorial Hospital, his roommate's treatment that ultimately the roommate passed away. And we've covered a lot of ground, Dr. Gafanti, but the vaccine piece we touched on a little bit earlier in the show, but I wanted to show that clip because one thing people will notice about that is there are no American accents in that reporting. Those are local TV news stations. There are no American accents in that reporting. Yeah, you got to chuckle because it's so damning that our society and our media, the corporate media, is really just government propaganda media now, and that's why shows like mine and the network I'm on are being built and exist today. And we want to have real people that are real experts, like a medical doctor like you with experience, to speak the truth. And the truth is, and I'm a person that took the vaccine. I was a military kid, so I've been vaccinated since I was a baby by literally hundreds of these things. So I went ahead and volunteered to take it early, just to help get the system to be able to treat this disease, because that's what we thought we needed to do at the time. But I would never take it now. And what you just saw in that clip is just the tip of the iceberg. And you mentioned it earlier, the Department of Defense issue, giving 97% of that cohort, which is under age 45 and bracketed at the age of 17 to 18 to age 45. And I just cannot imagine as a layperson what it's doing to our armed forces, to those young people, as those drugs work in their system. Your thoughts on what's going to happen in our society in the future as time goes forward and we continue to see these adverse effects, because they're not all just early or short term, are they?
Probably not. The reason I went against the vaccine was because of what I heard from Fauci and NPR. So when Fauci first announced the vaccine, he said you needed to be double masked, which means that you're contagious. The vaccine makes you contagious. It's like, I'm not interested in being contagious to my family and my loved ones. And then NPR explained what the vaccine is. So if you have time, I'll tell you what the vaccine is. So every virus is a golf ball with golf tees sticking out. Okay? The golf tees, the media have made known as the spike protein. The purpose of the spike protein is to find a cell that it can plug into so that the golf ball can merge itself with that cell and inject the DNA. So when you create a virus, right? It's just the vaccine is a superficial, an artificial virus that recreates the spike protein. What you're doing is sending out throughout your bloodstream, right? You no longer have your skin or your lungs or your intestinal tract to protect you. It's going throughout your body, and it's looking for a cell that it can fit into, right? Now, once it's got a cell that it can fit into, your immune system looks at it and says, well, that's cancer. Let's kill it. If that cell happens to be attached to your heart or your brain, or you get at the artery wall, then as it tries to, well, if it's in the arteries or the veins, you'll get a blood clot. If it's in the heart, the pericardium, you'll get pericarditis. If it's in the heart, you get the picture. You'll get inflammation wherever it plugs in. So
exactly, and that's what makes it very dangerous. Well, we've got one more question over in the live audience, real quick. Let's take that before we have to close out the show. Go ahead, Kat, with that audience member's question.
Go ahead, Santino.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to share some thoughts about things I've read and some other, well, in particular, the opinions of an epidemiologist named Dolores Cahill about not only the vaccine, but the mRNA that gets introduced to the cells through the vaccine. I won't even call it a vaccine. I refer to it usually as an injection, not a true vaccine. But anyway, I'll get to my point. So I'm hoping the good doctor can share his opinion and maybe correct my understanding. But with respect to the vaccine, my understanding about its function essentially is it's introducing a foreign mRNA, and the reason, the way it gets disguised so that the body doesn't immediately attack it is that mRNA is enveloped in a lipid nanoparticle, so that it goes into the system and the body doesn't react to it initially. But my understanding is that mRNA enters the cell and it modifies cell function so that the cell produces the foreign spike protein, which is supposed to trigger an immune response. Right. The problem with that, nobody knows if there's an off switch. And this goes back to reading I've done when they were first introducing mRNA technology to try to treat cancer, as you've just referred, Doctor. So the one thing my understanding is that the problem in the long term with these vaccines, and this is where
and what's your question, Santino? Because we're running out of time.
If the doctor agrees with the view of the vaccine in terms of its function, that it basically introduces an mRNA item to the cell, which then causes the cell to produce the proteins. The problem with the vaccines, and this is where I think, and I need the doctor's opinion, I believe the long-term effect is to diminish and even destroy immune function. Okay, thanks. I appreciate that, Santino. Go ahead, doctor, before we get to let you go.
I think it can overwhelm the immune system. It won't destroy immune function, but it'll certainly divert it. The only part of what you said that I disagree with is this is a bioweapon. Maybe they just left the mRNA in it, but there's some indication they put DNA in it. In fact, Dr. Latipo, who's our Surgeon General for Florida, does not recommend that anybody get it, because it's, when a drug company tells you it's not going to tell you what's in it, you know it's not a drug you should be taking.
That's right. Well, Dr. Gafanti, thank you so much for joining us today and helping educate the audience on what's really going on. We'll be watching this story and observing what's going on with Sarasota Memorial especially, and definitely be watching the progression and evolution of what happens to people that have had adverse effects of the vaccine, because I think that's the long-term danger for Americans and our society and all of our institutions. I'm Rob Maness from Patriot.tv live and X Spaces simulcast. We'll see you tomorrow on Truth Thursday, where we have David Pollock from the David Pollock Show and the DC Patriot. We'll be talking all politics.